So to get started, we first need to understand what base 10 blocks are. You'll see those across the top. Right now I'm pulling down some 1 blocks. Those are just units, and they represent ones, like in the ones place. Once we get 10 of them up there, though, you can see that 10 of those loose blocks is really kind of annoying, really hard to work with, and especially if I wanted to move it around. So I can group those 10 blocks together, and now you can see I've got a tens. We call them tens rods. We can keep on going. We can get 10 of those 10 rods. If you do the quick calculations, you'll understand why when we get 10 of them, it makes 100. 10 units in there multiplied by 10 makes 100. So once we get all of those up there, just like we did before, we can group it together, and we can see that when they're grouped together, that they're going to form one of those 100s blocks. Okay, all 10 of them up there, grouped together, and now when I pull down a 100s blocks to compare, you'll be able to see that they really do match up perfectly. Okay, so that's just the basic understanding of those base 10 blocks. Now, let's kind of switch gears just a second. Let's take a look at our problem that we have. In this problem, we are still using those base 10 blocks. We're just assigning slightly different meanings so that we can use them to represent decimals now. So the only real difference here is that 100s block, that's going to represent 1. I like to think of it as 100 pennies, but it's representing 1. The next block is the tens block, and I like to think of that as kind of dimes, where there's 10 dimes that would go into that 100s block, making one whole dollar. And that gets us to those smallest squares. Those are kind of like pennies. So we would need 100 of those to make one whole dollar, and we would need 10 of those to make one dime, or one of those 10th blocks. So it's the same idea, we're just kind of assigning them a little bit of a different meaning. So looking at that problem again, but with the understanding that it's no longer ones, tens, and hundreds, but instead it's hundredths, those small blocks that I'm pulling out now. And at 10 of those hundredths, like 10 pennies, can be grouped together to be 1/10, or a dime. Just like I can then take those 10 tenths blocks, or in other words, 10 dimes, and I can group all of those together. And now those blocks all grouped together are going to be one whole. Okay, so we're still looking at the same blocks, just giving them a little bit different meaning. Now let's go back to the actual problem. The problem says that Priya has built this model to represent the numbers 0 and 1300ths. The biggest thing is making sure that we understand how to actually represent and say that number, and that number is 1300ths. It's like saying 13 cents, which are pennies. So in this video now, I'm pulling out 1300ths, just the same way that she had those 13 small little hundredths sized blocks. Pulling out all 13, again, that's like having 13 cents. And we can make 13 cents in more ways than just having 13 pennies. We can make 13 cents by changing 10 of those pennies for a dime. So there's 10 of those hundredths that I have now grouped together to be a tenth. It's like taking those 10 pennies, grouping them to be a dime, and we would still have those 3 cents there at the end. Again, those cents are representing those hundredths. So 1300ths can be represented by 13 different hundredth pieces, or we can group 10 of those hundredths into one single tenth, and we would still have 1300ths represented.